Ennik. I've always admired you as the benchmark to being one of South Africa's most seasoned realtors and principals because you do things the right way. Ever since our time together in the late 90s and the fun we had together, your training and inductions to the industry remain synonymous with positioning agents and brokers for success. Thank you so much for joining me today. So, in your opinion, how have the principles to real estate changed, or have they?
It's changed a lot, and in many ways for the better, in many ways also very frustrating. One of the things that's been kind of like a stone in my shoe lately is that effectiveness of agents has been diluted a bit because of this screen that you and I are looking at right now. And that's something agents need to take into account and try and work around. People these days look at property on a laptop, and it's swipe left, swipe right. In the old days, if we got a buyer to come to a show day, they were in front of us. We could build a relationship. We could arrange to show them 4 or 5 other properties. They trusted us according to their needs, that we would show them properties that are relevant. And off they would go. And we would spend a couple of hours showing them a variety of properties. These days, and by doing that, this is the interesting thing. I remember doing statistics a long time ago that about 55% of buyers end up buying property that wasn't in line with their brief, and that brief varied by about 30 to 40%. So what they thought they were looking for, they ended up buying something that was different. And there lies the magic of what estate agents do, is that, we identify needs, and then the lights go on for us, and we think, that house, they may not like them, and they may think that they're not going to like that house. But once we show it to them, the entertainment area and the garden or whatever, just flicks the button and they buy. Even if the accommodation doesn't quite suit, etc., there's something else that they fall in love with, which they're not going to identify when they swipe left, swipe right on a screen.
So that physical encounter is still fundamental in the industry, and we try to encourage that. But how are you coping with that? Because yes, it's left and right. How do you bring that magic to the left and right screen?
Yeah, it's difficult, Craig, and in a way, I don't think we can get around it. These days, people seem to have a sort of a touch program with every aspect of their lives, and they don't go deep into any single, they just, that's the new world we live in. So we've got to somehow accommodate that. But part of it is persuading buyers not to be frivolous in their searches, not to gloss over a whole lot of properties, rather to get out into an area with an agent and physically, using your 5 senses, experience, the property you're looking at, and look at it, the streets, the altitude, where is it in the suburb, the location, all these things which you can't see on a screen. So in a way, there's an educating process here that somehow we need to take our buyers through. To try to let them avoid this thing of a rifle shot approach, looking for the right property on a laptop. It's such a big decision buying property that they, people actually must put time into it. They must invest time, must get out, must physically see. If you're buying a property, you must physically see 10 to 15 properties in the suburb that you can buy in, so that you become well informed, so that you are, as knowledgeable about price and area and property and type of property, etc., as the agent.
So Ronald, how do you instill that trust in the agent, or how do you bring that trust across in the new age agent that appears, that takes a client to a property? Because that still happens, no doubt. But the consumer is in so much control right now. How do you bring that message across in the belly to belly, in the face to face?
Yeah, I suppose it's one step at a time, Craig. Once you've made contact with a buyer, or a buyer has responded off the portal and wants to see a property, it's getting that buyer to that property, which is also a challenge these days. Even when somebody inquires, it's still difficult to set up the appointment, and then they want you to come to send them the link of the property or to send them a link of another property, and then it's difficult to track them down, to make the appointment, etc. But once you do get them in front of you, then it's about having this conversation I've just had with you, basically saying, I want to take you out and show you 4 or 5 other properties. Trust me, I now know your needs. I know what you're looking for. You need to physically drive the roads, walk up the driveways, experience the properties using all your senses, which is not what's happening when you're making the selections on a laptop. And so it's one step at a time. But here's the thing. I think that some of the new age agents are too used to communicating flat out, with a smartphone and engaging with their whole world on a smartphone. And there's a reluctance to engage physically, spend the time, get in the car and spend that, get out there. So there is that, we've got to kind of embrace that and figure out a way to still go back to the old school thing of you must see a whole lot of properties before you buy.
In essence, it's an energy thing as well. I mean, great agents need to deploy energy. Of course, there's a modicum of greater skill required today. So the question I want to ask you on that is, in this challenging market, and we know the markets are challenged, what is your approach to get sellers convinced to price their properties correctly? I know in so many cycles it's always been the challenge, but we are in this particular market right now where the market is hugely challenged, especially in the upper echelon. So how with all your skill and knowledge, how do you train your agents to price counsel the seller, to bring the seller down to a sense of reality as to what the asset is worth?
It's $1 million question, to try to get sellers to accept that that they're likely to sell at a point of discomfort. That is so difficult. Even though a lot of the work's been done for us by the circumstances we're in at the moment, Craig. The long list, and it really is a long list of issues that this country is facing, and other countries around the world, but we particularly with the load shedding, with unemployment, with the state of the economy, with businesses battling with these power outages, etc. So what all of that has done, and Craig, this is not recent. This is from the financial crisis till now. Property has not kept up with inflation, and I'm not saying only just. It's like by a mile. Property is more or less flatlined. It's been going at around 2%, sometimes less. We've had a couple of recessions. Few recessions during these 15 years, and whereas inflation has been going at a sort of 4.5%, and now recently close to 7%. This has meant that we've been ground down. It's been a wearing down process. There was only 1 year, 2015, where property prices beat inflation around about 7-8%. But other than that, every single year it's been lower. So how do you get a seller to accept that? Ironically, a lot of the work's been done. They understand that. I'd say 90% of sellers that we meet, they know the market is in a really poor state. In fact, in my 38-year career, I haven't seen sellers in such a dire position as they are in now, price-wise. So, just to discuss values. We are selling now at 2014 prices. 2014, if you're lucky, you might get a 2015 price. So somebody who bought in 2015 for anything over 2 million, 3 million, if they're going to be lucky to get that price that they paid in 2015. Okay, and that's why I have a I wrote an article recently about the conundrum. Municipal valuations keep going up, but they shouldn't be called a valuation because those are not market-related numbers, those municipal valuations. 2018, we weren't selling at 2018 municipal valuations. Now from 2018 to 2023, they've upped them again 12%, something like that across the board. So how do we get sellers to accept that value? They understand that before we even start talking to them, that house prices are down. Okay, to get them to realize that they're going to probably sell at a loss if they bought anywhere from 2014 onwards, and some, even a couple of them have been even earlier than that they bought, and they probably not going to achieve the price that they paid. That's a very difficult thing to teach someone. Okay, or to show a seller, but it all depends on their intentions, and many sellers, and this is why the property market is still turning over amazingly in these times. People have made plans, lifestyle plans. They want to move to the coast. Most of the coastal areas are doing quite well. The Western Cape is doing well. So people are semigrating, relocating in South Africa. And before we even arrive at the front door, they know they're going to get a low price on their property. One of the tips that I give agents is to try and persuade your seller not to put the property on the market and then add a bit of wiggle room. Because then you fall into the 30-40% oversupply of property that there is on the market, and you disappear and you don't stand out, and that property gets very few responses. We try and persuade sellers, you are going to sell, and it's, we're not going to tell you what you want to hear. We have to tell you just the facts. You are going to sell at a point of discomfort. Go to that point of discomfort now and hold the line. Go there and hold the line, because then your property will jump out and you are likely to get responses. Now consider this, there are 4 or 5 properties all at the same value. Each of them has added a bit of wiggle room, okay, like 10%, 15% on top of their price, because they say, well, and many sellers haven't traveled the journey yet. So they still think that their price is still reasonable, even with the wiggle room, okay? One of those properties comes down to the price that they want to sell at, their rock bottom price, and even they go down even a fraction less, and they advertise at that level and hold the line. And amazingly, from getting no responses, because those other properties kind of disappear amongst the rest, that property will suddenly get 3 responses out of the blue.
Because it doesn't fall into that category of oversupply priced incorrectly.
It looks like a good buy, Craig, because they've eliminated the wiggle room and they've come down to the hard line. Remember, the seller at the end of the day, he doesn't need to sign an offer that doesn't make him happy. Happy is stretching it in this market, but that he does. So they worry, oh yeah, but if I come down to that hard line, then they're going to come in a lot lower than the price I've advertised. But that's not necessarily true. If you come down to what the property's worth, it will sell at that price, because people will make comparisons and they'll see, but actually the value is here. They respond right at the beginning anyway, because it looks like better value than the other 4 or 5 properties that have been inflated.
So, I mean, transparency is a key, and quick transparency. How do you get Ronald to that quantum? And this is my conundrum at this moment. I come and visit you and I view your property. And if I follow that principle, how accurate am I to give you the price that your property in this market should be selling for? How do you do that?
Craig, over the years, my wisdom not my wisdom, my experience, I hope it leads to some wisdom, but we are not valuators, okay? So, and maybe this is a great opportunity to put out there the conundrum that we are in every time we need to value a property. We would like the opportunity to sell that property. The seller wants to get the highest price. But at the same time, if we quote an unrealistic price, we're not going to sell it. If we quote a price that's too low, there will be someone else quoting a higher price, even if it's not a realistic price, and they will get the opportunity to sell it, and we come second. There lies the conundrum. How do we put the price to the seller, as uncomfortable as it is, and still land the property to sell from our point of view, and still do the best job for the seller from his point of view? Okay, how do we do that? All these balls are in the air. So you might remember this, Craig, in going way back, because it hasn't changed. I tend to say to sellers, let's put your property on the market at X. Notice I didn't say that the house is worth X, because I'm not a valuator. It's not an exact science. The value can be anywhere in a 10, 15, 20% and more range. Okay? Top end, middle market, etc. Depends. So I suggest to the seller, you put your property on the market at X price, and that number that I put out there is slightly optimistic. I don't say it's worth that, and then I judge to see how has that landed. Is the seller is he comfortable with that? And then I say, with a view to fetching as close to that price as possible. However, we might need to, after a couple of months, come down to a lower number depending on market feedback, and then I drop even more or less what I think the property's worth in that paragraph. So we might need to come down 10, 15% over time, 3-4 months, depending on the response to the market. However, initially, and I bounce back up to that optimistic price, initially I'm prepared to try at that price. Now I've got price on the table, and it's in a range, and I quoted the top price first, okay? And I hope that keeps me competitive with the other agents that are coming in. But I have dropped in the realistic price, okay? And in that range, the discussion starts. But I don't think the top price is even high enough. Well, at least now I know where the seller's at. And I start to explain how the market's going to respond.
And if we go, people buy from people they like. So this is the ultimate relationship business. I mean, I always learned that from you. And so it's not what you say, it's how you say it, I guess. And I think that principle hasn't changed.
Yes. No, exactly. I mean, this game is not, real estate is not about property.
Yeah.
You can finish that sentence for me, Craig. It's not about property. It's about people. It's 100% about people, and it's 100% about relationships. And trust, is absolutely vital, is essential. New agents coming into the business have to have trust literally written on a massive big neon board above their laptop. Everything they do must be about building trust, and that's and that's lots of little steps. If you say you're going to phone someone at a certain time, you phone them at exactly that time. Even if it's 5 days later, not vaguely, not an hour later or whatever. And those little moments where you appear to be 100% reliable, that builds trust. And you can build those little moments in your arrangements that you make with the buyer. In fact, you can even set it up. You set yourself up. How do I phrase this? You set yourself up as though you might fail, but then you don't fail, and that scores a point for you. Like, for example, this thing of making an arrangement. I say to you, Craig, I'm going to call you on Wednesday afternoon. We need to have that cup of coffee. You say, great, Ronald, that's great. Now I set myself up. Now I say, I'm going to call you at 3:15 on Wednesday afternoon. And you're thinking, well, I don't mind if he just calls me on Wednesday afternoon, but now you're saying 3:15, and at exactly 3:15 your phone rings. And if you do those kind of little things, the person on the other side thinks, okay, this guy's for real. this guy is, he's trustworthy. He does what he says. Then we will go to the bigger things. If I'm telling you that's your price, there's no reason that you haven't trusted me up to now, then you must trust me on this price or whatever, Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. And just hearing this from you is just edifying the importance of building these relationships and the nuggets to do that. The question I want to ask you is in relation to pricing across the board in the northern suburbs of Gauteng. Now, in my time of real estate, we knew that there was a certain echelon and there were certain price categories. The middle class, to a large degree, has readjusted. What would you regard in your business as top end today in assets that you're taking to the market? So is it at that 10 million? Is it at that 5 million? Where is the traction right now? And what do we determine middle class or upper echelon in property today?
Okay. So the property economists have a very different range of price categories to the real estate market in these prime areas. And I say these prime areas, prime Johannesburg is basically, you can say, between Louis Botha Avenue and Jan Smuts Avenue, in that band going north all the way through to Fourways. That all of that property is regarded as prime. There aren't a lot of properties, for example, that will sell below $1 million or $1.5 million. So that million and a half is sort of regarded as our lower end of the market. And that's probably only sectional title apartments, maybe a few townhouses. But in that band, a little bit either side maybe of those roads, that's prime property. So northern suburbs, the bottom end is sort of around $1 million to $2 million is the lower end of the market. Your middle market is $2 million to about $4 million, $4.5 million, around there, middle market. The top end is above that. The property economists, you'll see on FNB's Property Barometer, and I think ABSA have a property economist, and various other, the Ruder report, etc. They define the categories differently, and because they take into account the very lower end of the market that's below $1 million. So their middle market is closer to 2 million, 1 million to 2 million, and the top end is sort of above 3 million. So there are differences, but in prime Joburg, which is prime northern suburbs, and Sandton, I would say from 4.5 million you're heading towards top end. Of course, you get Hyde Park, Sandhurst, and those areas, which there are houses that sell above 10 million. But the year in which the most expensive properties were sold, and they haven't been sold again to the same degree, was 2005, before the financial crisis. 2005, 2006 is when, Craig, you remember in those days, there were houses selling for 40 million. I remember Pam Goldie at one point sold, there were about 10 properties sold for 40 million. We sold to Tokyo Sequali for 55 million. That same house, by the way, interesting story, sold to Tokyo Sequali for 55 million in 2005. Since then, it has sold twice more. And I'm not exactly sure the prices, but there's something like this. It sold for 55 then it sold for late 30s, 38 million or something. Then it sold again for even a lower number. And that's what's happened to the very top end. That's been the sector of the market that's taken the most pain, even though I think those people feel less pain than people are experiencing much lower down. But the top end is, and why is that? It's because if you're going to spend 15 million, 20 million on a property, it's a discretionary purchase. It's not an essential purchase. It's a nice to have. You're living in a good house anyway, okay? But now you really want the grandeur, the mansion. But you don't have to have it. And people who are making that decision need to feel secure in the country. They need to feel that things are going in the right way. They need to feel that they spend that money on a big asset, that asset's going to appreciate in value. Okay. And many of them are deciding, no, I don't feel that confidence. I don't feel I can invest like that to that degree in this country. And so we've seen quite a lot of exiting of capital. People rather put their money overseas and not buy residential property at that level. And unfortunately, we've got 15 years of very little property growth. So there's, who's to say if I spend 15 million on a property that's going to be worth 20 million in a few years' time?
Or even retain its value at 15 million.
Sorry?
Even retain its value at 15 million.
Retain its value. And so far, the history has shown the opposite.
So Ronald, in closing with you on this, where do you think the strong points are now in the market? What do you think the projected future is for the areas of growth? Is it on the 1 to 2 million mark? Where do you see this market challenging?
Okay.
Let me repeat that. Where do you see this market channeling?
Okay. In other words, where is it going to go over the next few years? Yeah. So Craig, firstly, I don't see any reason for the property market, for the current trend to change. I think that, and that sounds very negative, there is a but. We have a long list of issues. It's 15, 20 items on that list of problems that this country is going through right now, which includes the politics and the war in Ukraine and service delivery and inflation and a whole long list. And these are all things that are impacting the property market. They're impacting sentiment. And I don't see that changing. I don't see any reason for that to change in the how far is the foreseeable future. So it's not that, I don't see it changing, except sentiment is an interesting thing. Sentiment can change very, very quickly. And we've had a grim market from the financial crisis till now. And then in December 2017, an interesting thing happened. You could probably finish my sentence. Cyril came to power, December 2017. Okay, the deal was done and he was in the saddle. And we had that period of Ramaphoria, just 3-4 months. It changed in an instant. That sentiment changed in an instant. So can something change the sentiment of the South African consumer in the foreseeable future? Well, the next possibility is going to be the election. Something could happen at the election in 2024. It could be a coalition that everybody feels this is it. This is a breakthrough. These guys can fix things. And if the media portray the outcome of the election in a positive way, you can see sentiment change in an instant, even with all these issues, and that will be positive to property prices. But other than that, it's probably our market's not going to change quickly at the moment. It's going to stay the way it is.
Well, Ronald, you're the troubadour of troubadours because you've been and lived through so many different cycles, and I remember many fundamental conversations with you, even when interest rates were in the upper 20s at one point in our cycle together. And I do remember in 2006, in 2007, when that Credit Act came in, everything just stopped. But we were doing great business, and we were tracing, and people would walk in and say, how much do you want for the house? And they'd offer the full asking. I mean, we went from one extreme to the other. So we've lived through that cycle as well. So there's exactly that. When the Credit Act came in, things stopped. So things can turn on again. And you're in for the long haul. I know that because you've always been a stable trainer in property as such. You don't go away easily, and it's resistance and resilience, but the fundamentals are so key from our time together that I recall learning and training with you. I can tell you it's kept me in positive spirit, that anything can happen at any time.
And Craig, thank you for that. And there is a thought that that I'd like to sort of leave behind, and that is, I think this is accredited to Jack Nicklaus, the golfer. Doesn't matter what your circumstances, doesn't matter what the environment is, doesn't matter what's happened to you. You choose how you respond. And I keep thinking that. And agents that are trying to get traction, that are trying to break in, that are trying to get out there, if you can find a positive every day, as many as you can, and respond positively all the time, because there's so much to be negative about. But if you can be positive, and if you can say, yes, these things have happened, these are grim, but this is what I think, and it's, and you have an upbeat approach to things, that attitude will take you through, will get you through the toughest.
Ronald Ennik, thank you so much for joining me on Chat Prop. It's been invigorating having this conversation with you. Thank you, Ronald.